Welcome back to another episode of Inside Multifamily Access Control. It's a mouthful every single week. With me, as always, is Colin. Appreciate it, Colin. How you doing?
Doing well. Glad to be here again.
Yes, sir.
Sunny
So
in
with
Minnesota,
us,
so I'm happy. Sorry.
What's that? Say that again.
It's sunny in Minnesota, so I'm happy today.
Yeah, well, get those 2 weeks in now. So very excited today to have Jennifer Hones join us. She's with Milestone. I met Jennifer through actually doing a clubhouse, two more of those, and we hit like hipster bingo, right?
Oh yeah.
On that end, right?
Trending.
So, yeah, very much. But we met there through mutual colleagues in the industry and had a conversation really around open and closed and APIs. It's very topical right now in our industry, especially in multifamily, where you're seeing a ton of tenant experience, property management applications, systems, working with systems. And I would say as an industry, there's areas and pockets that we have some legacy with them. And then there's areas and pockets that this is a brand new concept. There's confusion about what open is, what isn't. You have groups like Mercury and some other companies where you can dig a little bit and it's like small O, not big O when it comes to open. And it really depends on how it's presented. So very topical. Thank you, Jennifer, for joining us. We really appreciate you doing that.
Well, this topic is near and dear to my heart, so I'm all about it.
Yeah, I loved the passion when we went at it. For some reason, I was the homer on closed APIs and it was painted, but it was mainly just to drive a conversation. But maybe I'll play that role again today. But before we do that, we'd always like to hear your background. Give us a little bit about who you are, how you got in the industry, how long you've been here, what you work on, what you do.
Yeah. Well, some people may or may not know that I actually played basketball at Stanford University. And if anyone paid attention this past weekend, I am obviously gloating. I live in Tucson, Arizona, so, home of the Wildcats. And so I was happily wearing my Stanford gear at a local establishment with being surrounded by Arizona fans. So fortunately, I am here today to talk to you and didn't,
Thank you. I appreciate you making the time. I'm sure it was a long weekend. What position would you play?
I played point guard, and I would say I played point guard. I think I'm a little bit too bossy to play anything other than that position. Like to direct the troops,
I appreciate the self-awareness.
Yeah. No. So basketball, oddly, is a reason that I'm in the security industry. I knew a guy who worked at Milestone in Beaverton who had followed my basketball career since I was actually before high school. And, when I finished up undergrad, I went to lunch in Beaverton where I grew up and ran into this guy. And as fate would have it, I actually had a job at Milestone by the end of the next week. So it started off at a relatively entry-level position at Milestone, but I've been fortunate to hold different project-driven and role-based positions at the company within our go-to-market organization, so sales and marketing. Worked at Milestone for 4 or 5 years, left for a few years, and was fortunate again to come back. And now I've worked my way up into a managerial role on the key account team. And so I manage a team that's focused on working with end customers, enterprise, federal, end user engagement.
Very cool. It's always good to hear when somebody boomerangs with a company. It tells you a lot about the culture of an organization that can go happen. And you see it a little bit within our industry, but I have a feeling we're going to see a lot more of it. So that's very cool. Well, good for you. That's a great background in as a Pac-12 fan on that end. Although an Oregon Duck fan, we'll let it slide today on this.
Hey, if growing up,
you have your moment right now.
Hey, growing up in Oregon, I was Oregon Ducks over Oregon State through and through. Just so happened that Stanford came knocking.
I don't blame you. No, but by the way, I used to live on 185th in Beaverton, but so I didn't realize you were from there. Very cool. Well, all right. So on this subject, if you would give us a little bit of background on Milestone's approach with APIs, because I think that'll be a good table set of where you're coming from on the conversation about APIs, open, close, what they are, all that.
Right. So if we go back in time, a little history lesson, in 2008, actually, even though Milestone was founded in 98 on this concept of open, it was really back in 2008 that we really doubled down on the concept of an open platform and what does truly open mean at that time. And kind of what we're seeing now is that there's a lot of companies that saw the success that we were having by saying that we were open. And they're like, well, if we just say that we're open, maybe we can have that success as well. And so Milestone, we were getting hit with people saying, well, okay, yeah, you guys are open, but what else? And we're like, no, like open is core to what we're trying to accomplish here. And so even back in 2008, we released this white paper on what we believed are the 5 hallmarks of a truly open platform. And so one of them is the use and availability of common external programming interfaces, such as APIs, but also offered at no charge to developers and users. The second hallmark was published documentation, like an SDK, because it's one thing to offer the APIs, and it's quite another to go an extra mile and provide the tools, the libraries, documentation to make them actually easy to use. The third hallmark is availability of training for programmers on how to actually use those APIs. The fourth one is availability of project consulting. So having engineers from our side being able to help with these other companies and other vendors' products to ensure quality integrations. And the last one is honestly walking the talk, right? It's one thing to say that you're open, but to really live it to your core values. Milestone, again, we rebranded ourselves, or I guess added the tagline of the open platform company. And we live that in our culture, which is a reason I wanted to come back to Milestone. That, from a cultural standpoint, I never find that I'm feel closed off from getting assistance that I need at the company, right? So it's just starting from the culture and working its way out into the market of what really is a truly open platform.
Yeah, what's interesting there is a lot of it built around it is the approach that you have from a services standpoint, not as much on the technical side, which is typically we gravitate. Now, technical's in there, you have the APIs and the endpoints that are there. So couple questions on that. Now that's on the video side, you're seeing a lot of conversation that goes around that. As you move in to the access control in some of the lock areas, it's maybe not as much adoption or point of view on it yet as much as we think we're going to be. But let me ask you though, from a standpoint of open, right? Because you can, depending on how you define it, open platform and that. Now, can I, as a developer, come in and you haven't like opened up your back-end technology to where can I just create an application if I wanted to using yours, or are there restrictions there, or is it just completely wide?
Well, I guess it would be whatever restrictions would be within the MIP SDK framework that we have. But we really want as many people to create innovation into the Milestone platform and together with the Milestone platform. We believe that we don't need to be the ones making access control, because you guys are out there making great access control and making a variety of different access control components. So why not us partner up together to really do that? So for as much as we can, without probably sharing, secret sauce source code, we have our MIP SDK available online to download for free. So if you're bored this weekend or the weather takes a turn, Colin, feel free to download it, read all up, and start your integration.
Yeah, no. So I think the open piece is very interesting to me, right? And I think in the security industry, there's also a misnomer on open of this difference between your core work that you do, right? And open to other cameras and manufacturing things of that nature versus open to the non-video platform stuff and the other aspects of the ecosystem. Can you talk to kind of Milestone's approach there? Because I think oftentimes when we think of, a video system is open, that means all these different cameras can come in and talk to it. But when you guys say open, it means a totally different piece, right? How do you guys kind of differentiate that between different camera types versus the full-on ecosystem open and as you kind of what you were just talking about of anybody?
Yeah, so Milestone, we have over 10,000 unique drivers to integrate with cameras, as you were talking about. But we also, over the past few years, I don't remember the exact year, we came out with kind of like a generic third-party driver, because as we're seeing, the uptick of IoT type devices or non-visual sensors coming in with the different types of metadata that they can bring in. You want, IoT sensor for building occupancy, or you want, to take advantage of the latest, temperature detection, not in thermal cameras, but something else. How do you bring that into a system versus having them be standalone? And so, for us, again, we have the MIP SDK, but then we also have this generic third-party driver to really enable people to go in and create things that maybe we don't have in those 10,000 drivers that exist today. And I think that, continuing to get back to the concept of what truly makes a company open is really walking that talk, right? And so I think what we see is there's a lot of companies that are like, oh yeah, well, we're open and yeah, we're integrated. And I think that that's kind of where I'd be curious from your guys' opinion. is that I think that the definition of integrated is what really kind of burns people from an openness standpoint. You know, you guys are in access control. And so for Milestone, we could say, oh yeah, well, we're integrated in with Salto, but what does that mean, right? Does it mean that within Milestone, we just get to see the alarms coming in? Okay, that's integrated. Or does it mean that we can actually unlock doors? We can talk to people through two-way intercoms. We can show, you know, visualization on a map so you can start to see the alerts coming in. Oh, and when you close out the events in Milestone, it closes out in the access control platform. That to me is what I would consider truly integrated. But I think that there's this lack of definition around integration that then open, you know, people being a little bit lazy can say, oh yeah, we're open. But what does that mean? What does integrated in with this system mean?
Yeah, and I feel like in some cases the definition and the demand has outpaced the imagination and execution of a lot of the companies in our space, where, you know, the integrations, well, most companies' products, especially in the access control, were built seed to flower, where an integration was, I took video and I attach it to the system. So when a door event happened, you can see a video. And it was like, yep, nailed it. We're good. And then like you moved on. And frankly, for a long time, that was the expectation that a lot of the end users and people had. And then as at some point there was a tip, and it's even more like the floodgates are open now, where the expectations of what integrated means from a software standpoint, where the expectations are like embedded, like in built with, and creation of added value exponentially beyond just the two systems, like, you know, being smashed together. Because most of them, again, seed to flower, not built. Like someone said, hey, can you add this thing to it? And you're like, well, let me look at my product roadmap. Sure, we could fit it into here. You know, how big of an opportunity is? Can we go win that? Will you not leave? Like, okay, cool, we'll do it. And then, like, you know, it was added to the list of things that someone, you know, that Tommy did on the side instead of doing the other work that the product manager begged and hoped that they would do, versus purposeful development work on that end. And I think that we're starting to see, and maybe integration still lives. It's just that definition doesn't expand, and we now move into like embedded and strategic approaches, because you could still, even if you have closed APIs, you could still have strategic and embedded in a lot of ways. It may not go as fast, and it may not be perceived as much value. But what I'm excited about is at least we're starting to see the conversation in the demand happening of how systems should work versus how they maybe have historically worked. Where, let's be honest, a lot of it, we would use excuses like, it's not as secure if we do that. And then now we have a bunch of people being like, is that true? Really? It's not? I think it may be. So, yeah.
Well, people definitely latch on to a talking point that worked for them 5 years ago that they forget that maybe has been updated in the past 5 years.
Yeah. Let me go ahead, Colin.
Well, I was just going to kind of touch on something that Jennifer said earlier, in I think it piggybacks into what you were just saying, Lee, of APIs in the past and this idea of integration and things of that nature limited it really to the two companies that are having that conversation, right? In creating that. And when you really start to think about openness with APIs and things of that nature, and now the end users can start to play a role in that development. It takes that innovation to a whole nother level when it's not two companies who are comparing roadmaps and saying, hey, okay, we think we can win X number of dollars over the course of the next 3 years with this. In a truly open environment like that, end users now can deploy innovation and develop that innovation. And I think that's a missing piece when in the security world, when we used to think of it just as integrations, two companies coming together. When you really view it as an open opportunity, it's not just limited to those two people making, you know, revenue-based decisions over the next 3 years. It truly changes the game when the end users can participate in that.
Yeah, and I think that what you know, I have a few different clients that I'm working with right now, and you know, when they first came to us and to, you know, some of the partners that are coming together in this integrated environment, the bare bones of what we had for that integration was sufficient at that time to fit their needs. But as their needs evolved, as they started to realize all that they could do with video or with IoT sensors or with other things, they then came back to us with some wish lists of like, hey, it would be really great now that we have, you know, this fundamental working level of like the products integrated together, tested, you know, et cetera. Now we would love if, you know, you could do X, Y, Z. And so then we go together back with the manufacturers that we're partnered with on there with that direct feedback from, you know, very important end customers of ours. And not to say that, you know, unimportant end customers don't matter, you know, but when we are able to get that feedback directly, and that's where I love my role at Milestone and my team's role, is because we get to engage directly with these end customers, right? We get to hear from their mouth, you know, what it is that they're looking at, not just today, but what are some of the trends that they're seeing moving forward. And then because Milestone, we do have openness to our core, I don't have, you know, concerns going and sharing not customer information, but like, hey, here's a trend that we're seeing. What are you guys doing for this? I think this is gonna, you know, be something that's important to the industry. And I think that what we see is that, you know, when companies don't walk the talk with open, when they do kind of leave what you said, it's like, okay, well, we can bring, you know, video into access control and then we're done. But if you want something deeper, you need to use our video platform. Don't bother with this third-party platform because, yeah, we, you know, kind of played lip service to the fact that we can integrate. We have a really light integration, but in order to take advantage of, I mean, we see camera manufacturers out there that say, okay, yeah, we're open. You can use OnViv, but all this AI features that I'm selling you on, you will have to use our software, and our software only works with our cameras. Or you'll see other access control vendors out there that are like, oh yeah, we can bring Milestone video in, but if you want to do anything else, you really need to use our video management software. And I wouldn't say that those companies would be open in the true open hallmarks of how we defined it. That.
Yeah, as an industry, we need to probably have more conversations around what open is and start to define normal sort of language that is used across, so that, because right now it's a bit confusing. Let me ask you this, changing gears a little bit about, so when you talked about your, you know, Milestones approach, that you all made a conscious decision that in order to be open, at least for yours, that there is no charge to get access to those APIs, which is a business decision that was made on that end. I guess your perception and or at least your opinion, or what you've seen in the marketplace, like, is you all define that as being open, but if I do charge for it, does my desire to have a business engagement based off of them to maybe put proper resources towards it, does that make it less open by your definition, or is that just a business decision that I made?
So I would say fundamentally, it's probably the business decision. And I think that, you know, when we look at, you know, how we're going to scale the industry, it's that, you know, manufacturers need to see that there is commercial viability and scale for being open, right? I think Milestone, we've been around since '98. We've clearly seen that we have that scale and that you know, economic viability, if you will. But for another manufacturer, it's really up to them to decide how they want to engage with that open concept. But I think that there's really this kind of, you know, fundamental difference in views of open versus closed and what's truly best for the end customer. You know, what you're saying is the commercial viability of the manufacturing partner. And of course you want the manufacturers to be there, because if they're not there, you can't use their technology. But if we're looking at the end customer, you know, what's your view on how that customer is best served in the industry? Is it with an open concept where, you know, best of breed innovation from the entire industry could be leveraged into their system? Or is it, okay, I truly believe that I'm going to be best served by getting all of my components from one manufacturer, or from a manufacturer that, you know, forces me to get on the roadmap, to get an integration put together. I don't have the freedom and flexibility to actually go and grab those APIs or SDKs to go and do. I want to go and hire a third party to go and do this development, and you won't let me do it. Like, that's where I'm like, that seems kind of fly counter to the open concept in our definition of it.
No, and that's fair, and I can see that. I guess my in some cases it is a little bit of preference in some cases, right? And you can make arguments, totally could see both sides of it, where it's sort of, you know, having that flexibility and that freedom, you can go do that. Whereas in some cases, I don't know, an end user may seem, you know, like, I appreciate all that, but I think this is the best solution for what I have, and then they go with it. My fear is that it turns into like a religious war, type conversation around different camps, right? And like, whoever can scream the loudest is the one that's right. Where I do think there's valid points on saying, all right, like you said, to spark innovation, there's a whole crew, and rightfully so. It's like open APIs, open information, open documentation. It creates innovation. I think we saw a bit of it today, that there was the Google Oracle that came down from the Supreme Court, where Google was able to use Java in order to create whatever it is that they created. I don't know, but that's reporting right there. But that allowed
vague enough.
Innovation
Vague enough.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly, covered the whole thing. But no, it was intended because it can spark creativity and spark innovation. So there is on that side. Let me ask you, sorry, shift gears one last time, to talk about the integrator in this, right? Because when this starts happening and is happening and it's open, the definition of an integrator in a lot of cases changes as well, especially when it's like app to app integration versus configuration of a system, right? Because there's different types on that end. I mean, do you see a new type of integrator being introduced, or current ones morphing into, like, I think ISVs and Salesforce and ServiceNow world and the rest of them? Like, do you see a model like that? Like, how do you view the impact that APIs have on the integrator?
Well, I mean, I am currently working on, a bid document that, the VMS is just one sliver, of the solution, as we typically are, right? We're one of the lower, I guess, rungs on the totem pole from a cost standpoint, but from an interface standpoint, we're sometimes the number one interface, right? And I could see from an integrator, as I'm even looking through this document, and I'm like, whoa, this looks complicated, that you want to minimize the number of vendors that you're working with, because it potentially minimizes complexity. But I think that as you're looking out for yourself, then you're also maybe not putting that customer first, because if you're not starting off on the right foot, this bid that I'm working on right now, they didn't start off on the right foot, and they came to Milestone and they were like, hey, can you guys work with these cameras? And I'm like, no, we can't. And they're like, well, when is Milestone going to be more open? And I'm like, oh, okay. And they're now having to do this whole rip and replace of like massive amounts of hardware and infrastructure because they didn't start off on the right foot. And so I think that the VARs that I see that have continued to be successful have continued to put that, yeah, maybe there is a little bit more time that's spent leveraging different vendors, but the ultimate end result for this customer is going to set them up for more success, as well as hopefully set me, the integrator, up for continued service of these accounts. So, whether or not I've seen a new integrator in the physical security space, if you don't bring in cloud, I think once you introduce the cloud component and have you put things in Azure and AWS and help companies make that migration from on-prem to cloud, then it's definitely a new integrator. And those integrators have existed. AWS has been around, Azure has been around, Google Cloud has been around. So integrators like that exist on that side. And as these companies are moving their workloads into the cloud, then these integrators are starting to poke into where the typical traditional physical security integrator operates. But what I've seen is that the integrators that have really standardized their vendors, they know what works for them, their recipe for success, they use a variety out there, that they've been some of the best performing integrators in the entire country. So I think it's maybe the integrators that are wondering how to move forward in the industry should maybe look towards some of their peers who have had success in leveraging an open platform. That was a long answer, but
no, it's good. I the part that I like that you said a couple times in there is the customer centricity side of starting there as a whole, and then working your way back, like of deciding making decisions based off of that, and the ones that the customers, again, that are the integrators, the VARs that are doing that as well, are set up for success. Colin, any other thoughts on your end?
Yeah, tons, but we don't have all day to chat through.
No, Jennifer, she plans to be here all day.
I have 30 minutes blocked out for the invite, so.
There you go. Fair enough. No,
appreciate the thoughts and insight. Yeah. I think it's the ideas of open is changing every day, right? And everybody has a different opinion of it. I think APIs and how organizations position themselves is going to really dictate a lot of the business in the next 3 to 5 years for sure, but maybe even 12 to 18 months. So very, very pertinent information, and appreciate the thoughts and insight.
Yeah, absolutely. The beginning of a long conversation, and thank you for bringing, you're not like an outside view, you're in the industry and security, but just from a different point of view of people that have were in a part of the industry that has been a bit more progressive on this. So thank you for providing that, and appreciate the time. And I enjoy your approach to it, and look forward to many more conversations. So thank you.
Well, thanks for inviting me on.
Of course. All right, cool.
Thanks.
Thank you.